This open-eyed meditation experience that we've had just shared over and over again is the most sacred experience that I have ever had in my life. I've practiced in Japan with the head of the Soto school of Zen. I've practiced in India in numerous places, in Nepal, in Tibet. I've practiced in Europe. I've practiced with Sufis. For me, consistently, this is the most sacred experience. It reaches the most deeply into me and extends itself most profoundly into the field of my experience. And usually people who come here for this experience are at least slightly considering trying to have a spiritual life. Maybe. So, what does that mean, to have a spiritual life? Because I was raised religious, my parents were very devout Catholics. I was a devout Catholic. Because I was raised religious, when I understood that the world that my time in the that the life that my time in the university was preparing me for was not a life I could actually live in. When I figured out that, selling life insurance or whatever else it is I was going to have to do at an entry-level circumstance was not going to work for me at all, I turned my attention to what I had understood about spirituality from my time in Catholicism, and I worked from there. A spiritual life means that we are starting to that we have some sense anyway, that there's something in us that is more meaningful than the endless amounts of negative feedback that we get moving through our daily life. Even I, and even now, every day, get endless amounts of negative feedback. The bigger person you become, the more negative feedback you will get. And you can just adjust yourself to that. And if all that there is in our lives for us is negative feedback, the struggle to establish ourselves in some circumstance which our parents have conditioned us to live in, then what will happen to us is that we will build a shell around our hearts, and slowly that shell will grow to consume our body and our mind. And we will be perfectly, hermetically sealed in the disappointments of our ancestors. That's what we all came to do here in this world, isn't it? Doesn't that sound like a great life? Not. So to have a spiritual life takes, we'd like to sort of try to understand what it is inside us that is more meaningful than that endless loop, negative feedback loop. And for that, we have to start to quiet our mind and feel a little more deeply into our hearts. And feeling into our hearts, for me, it was, what happened to me was how it happened in 1968 that I started practicing yoga in Indiana, I have no idea. It was more or less a miracle, because you know how much yoga there is in Indiana now? Hardly any. How much was there in 1968? Well, there was one little guy who happened to be a yoga teacher, who was also my math professor. And it was doing yoga that got me out of my head and out of my tensions, and really reminded me strongly that what was alive about me was not in my head, but rather in the middle of my heart, in the middle of my chest. And I turned my attention inward through the practice of yoga. Really simple, it's just moving our bodies creates a flow. Feeling that flow, it doesn't create it, it enhances it. But feeling that flow, we come to understand that we are not a thing, and our life is not a thing. We are a process that, at its essence is energy, and that energy at its finest will be flowing within us and around us. This flow, while it's going on constantly, to really experience it and reach to the deepest possibility that is within that flow for each of us, requires a conscious effort. It's not a complicated effort. It's not rocket science. It's just being a little bit aware and feeling that flow within us feels incredible. And feeling that incredible, well, it changes our body, it changes our nervous system, it changes our mind, it extends itself through the whole field of our experience and changes our life. And instead of spending our lives scrapping and struggling and working and reaching out to try to craft together somehow a life that our mothers would approve of, interestingly, it was only in the last months of her life that my mother ever approved of my life. I was okay with that. Instead of creating a life that our mothers will approve of, we reach into ourselves and activate our own spirit, we activate our own soul, we awaken an unimaginable possibility that is ever present within us, and constantly breathing to that and holding that deepest, sweetest space that we can feel within ourselves, we extend our awareness throughout the field of our experience, and rather than trying to become something somebody approves of, by God, that something in us wakes up and expresses itself as the truly extraordinary human being that we actually are. Instead of living a life tangled up in negative feedback loops, we begin to free ourselves from every negative feedback loop, every pattern of tension. And find as we release those tensions that our creative energy is ever more deeply flowing. And in that ever deepening flow, health is delivered to our body. Love is delivered to our hearts. Light is delivered to our minds. And our life expresses itself as true beauty. Having conquered the threat recognition mechanism that is our mind, that keeps us constantly in a state of fear and closed. Having conquered that, we begin to see the world not as an endless series of threats that we need to protect ourselves from. We experience diversity, not as something we have to hold at bay until, we prove that it's not going to hurt us. But rather we experience, all of life and all of its diversity as an expression of something truly extraordinary and vast, and rich and nourishing and profound that we have the capacity to connect to and participate in and be uplifted by. This sacred experience that we share is an opportunity to access an extraordinarily fine energy and to connect yourself in that energy so that a deeper and finer part of you begins to resonate and come alive, and your life, the life you have right now, becomes beautiful. And day by day by day, that beauty becomes stronger and ever more clearly expressed in all of the fields of your activities. The work of our practice is twofold. It is one, the first part is dissolving the tensions. It's seeing your own tensions and dissolving them. If you don't know what a tension is, just, feel in your heart. If it feels hard and it ain't sweet, that is tense. And not tense is when you feel a flow and you experience that as a little bit of deliciousness. Or sometimes a whole lot of it. The first part is dissolving the tensions. And the second part is taking the energy in ever more deeply. Feeling the breath, feeling it move in us, feeling all of our life experiences, however dissonant some of it is, and all of you and all of us know every day has a measure of dissonance in it. Every day. Every day is slightly retuning us. And the degree to which we can embrace that retuning is the degree to which we will become completely refined, and our intellect will have the clarity and the subtlety to be able to penetrate the whole field. And slowly, our vision will connect us up in a way that we understand exactly what the world is and exactly how we are to be in this body, in this world. The work of our practice is not particularly hard. Sometimes when there's a lot of, when we're in periods where we're experiencing some kind of heartbreak or some kind of distress, it can be more work to maintain our equanimity, to let our guard down, to let some strong energy come inside us. That can be hard. But it's not much. That's not the bulk of anybody's daily life. It's not really hard work. It just takes a little time every day to feel into your heart. And isn't that what we all want to do anyway? To feel into our heart and begin to, through our capacity to make this simple conscious effort, become ever more authentically who we really are. And not let the tensions in our life and all the bullshit that we have to endure every day make us ever more inauthentic and not who we really are, and make our life ever more strongly a life that we actually cannot live in. So we're going to leave this room in a little bit, and my first thing to you is I want to say to you, go out there and love the life you have. Love the life you have. Don't, when you see stuff you don't like, when you see stuff you want to get rid of, well, you may eventually, but the first thing is love the life you have. Because, I'll put it to you this way. The Goddess has given us the life we have. Specifically, uniquely, each of us has a life that we have been given to grow in. For all of its challenges, for all of its whatever is hard about it, whatever is mushy about it, whatever, this is the life. It's not some other life. And growing our own hearts in the context of the life we have will mean that after a little while it doesn't look at all like it does now. And it will be not a reflection of our tensions, not a reflection of our dissatisfaction, not a reflection of our struggle. It will be a reflection of our life will become a reflection and an expression of the very finest, the deepest, the divine dimension of us. And beautiful.